Thoughts create reality. Okay, how do you do it? I thought that was a great question because this is a time in history right now. 15 years ago, it was philosophy. Ooh, quantum physics. Now everybody's informed. Now people. This is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how. Just to know how to do it. And if you give them that sound scientific information, I now know that if I can speak it in a way that nothing is left to conjecture, nothing is left to superstition, nothing is left to dogma. They know exactly what they're doing and why. And the moment you know the what and the why, the how starts to get easier. So I will deliver concepts, ideas, mix different forms of science to create a model of understanding. And I now know that if that person, as I develop this model of understanding, can explain that model to someone else, they're wiring it in their brain. They're installing the hardware. If they can't explain it, it's not wired in their brain, and they're not going to believe that they can do it. So if they can turn the person next to them between the two of them and build a model of understanding, they're making their brain fire in new sequences and new patterns and new combinations. They're changing their mind. Mind is the brain in action. If I keep reminding them of what they're learning, nerve cells that fire together wire together. They're installing the circuitry. Now, the next step is to provide the environment and give them the proper instruction to get their behaviors to match their intentions, to get their actions equal to their thoughts, to get their mind and body working together. If they do, they're going to run into a new experience. Now, the crazy thing about the experience is learning is making new synaptic connections. That's what learning is. Research shows that you pay attention and learn something new and you repeat it just for an hour, you're going to double the number of connections in your brain. That's a lot, 1,600 to the 3,200 connections. That's a lot of extra connections. But if you don't review it, if you don't think about it, if you don't repeat it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So if learning is making new connections, then remembering is maintaining and sustaining those connections. You got to review it. It's so much easier to forget than remember when it comes to this stuff, and it's a constant process. So then, if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, and they have a new experience. Experience enriches the philosophical circuits in the brain, but when those neurons string into place, the brain makes a chemical, and that chemical is called a feeling or an emotion. And when you start feeling unlimited, when you start feeling worthy, when you are having an experience that causes you to be more in love with life, it is that chemical release from the limbic brain that teaches your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. So if knowledge is for the mind, experience is for the body, and in that moment the person's embodying the truth of that philosophy, and now they're selecting and instructing new genes from the experience because the chemistry that's coming from the environment is information. And so genes make proteins, and all of a sudden they start wearing a different body. Repeat it over and over again. Do anything over and over again. Neurochemically, you'll condition your mind and body begin to work as one. Do it enough times, now your body will know better than your conscious mind. Now it's innate in you. Now it's second nature. Now it's simple. Now you know that you know. You may not know how you do it. You don't know how you know how, but you can do it because it's subconscious now. So now that implicit memory, now you're mastering that knowledge. You're mastering the philosophy. You're becoming the knowledge. You're embodying it so much so that it's automatic, it's effortless, it's easy. So when we started looking at people's ability to regulate their brainwaves, we just published a paper, it just got released yesterday. Our students in our community can do it in 4 seconds, 5 seconds, 9 seconds, 11 seconds. It's not like, hey, I'm getting to the divine ahead of you. It's just like they've done it so many times, like it's like driving a stick shift. It's not a difficult thing, but they practiced and they came up against their blocks. They came up against their limitations. They came up against their frustrations. They came up against their analytical mind, and I want them to in a week-long event, because if not now, when? Now is the new later, and let's do it now, right?
Yes.
So then what we learned when we started studying brains, well, we were doing pre and post measurements, and we've got thousands and thousands of brain scans. We have real-time brain scans too, and when I started seeing people whose brains were getting worse during a meditation, I said to them, what are you doing in there? And 100% of the time, they were analyzing their life or themselves within some disturbing emotion. And if emotions are the record of the past, and those emotions are derived from the hormones of stress, They were thinking in the past. And I learned right in that moment that if I got the person past the emotion, cross the river of change with me, forget about the emotion, just keep overcoming it. Forget about the past. Dragging people out of their past is the work. And so when we started studying those brains and we started seeing changes, pre and post measurements, I realized the change wasn't just in their mind. It was actually in their brain. And that we were measuring different compartments of the brain, and when we're living in stress and we're living in survival, when the brain is aroused into those high beta brainwave patterns and we're out of balance and we're trying to predict and control everything in our life, and we're shifting our attention from one person to another problem, to another thing, to another condition. Every person, every object, everything, every place has a neurological network in your brain. So as the person was aroused by the hormones of stress like a lightning storm in the clouds, their brain was firing very incoherently. Different compartments were out of sync with other compartments of the brain. And if your brain is incoherent, you're incoherent. And if your brain isn't working right, you're not working right. So if it requires a clear intention and elevated emotion to begin to change reality, and you have an incoherent brain, what kind of signal are you sending out into the field? Pretty static. In fact, better way to say it is you have no Wi-Fi signal. You're separate. And the hormones of stress create separation. And when you're sitting in a staff meeting and you're looking at that person and you just want to punch them in the head, or you want to throttle them in some reason, or you're angry on traffic and you're turning on those hormones, you're stepping on the gas. But at the same time, you can't fight, you can't run, you can't hide, you're stepping on the brake. You step on the gas and the brake at the same time, your heart starts beating incoherently and energy leaves the brain and heart. We've seen this so many times. So then, if the thought is the electrical charge in the quantum field, and the feeling is the magnetic charge, and how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, then we got to get energy right into this center right here. Because if you're going to believe in that future that you're imagining with all of your heart, it better be open and activated. And we got to teach people how to create heart coherence. And we have beautiful imagery to show that when a person's heart is coherent, like taking a big sheet and just flushing it, just whipping it like that wave that's created, the heart begins to send profound waves of energy into the brain, and the brain goes into a creative state. So the heart is the creative center. And our heart begins to drive our brain into more alpha patterns, more creative patterns. At the same time, when the heart gets coherent, it's producing an ambient magnetic field up to 3 meters wide. Now you're more wave, less particle, more energy, less matter. You're emitting a coherent signature. Now that energy is frequency. And that frequency carries information. So once energy begins to activate the heart and you're giving thanks for the event before it's happened, your body's so objective, it's believing that it's happening to you, because what is the emotional signature of gratitude? When you get something favorable, you receive something favorable, something just happened to you that you like, something's happening to you, say, thank you. The feeling of gratitude, the emotional signature, means it's happening to you, it's already happened. So it is the ultimate state of receivership. So teach a person how to give thanks before it happens, open their heart, and their heart's like a pounding of a drum or dropping a pebble in water, is producing this field. It's that energy, that creative energy, can carry the thought of their health. It can ride, that intention can ride on the wave. That could be wealth, new relationship, suffering, and the energy does not carry the thought of health. It carries a different set of thoughts. So people say to me, well, I can't open my heart. Well, I ask them, well, what do you practice feeling all day long anyway? Because you're so good at feeling something else, you haven't practiced feeling it. So then, when we teach people this formula, they have to keep overcoming their thoughts, overcoming their impatience, overcoming the programs, they come right up against it. Anything that's standing in the way between them and their connection, they got to do business with it. And so as they start removing those veils, those masks, those layers, and they start crossing that river of change, and their heart starts to open a little bit, and they feel a little bit more, and they feel a little bit more, and their brain is coherent. Now they have a coherent brain and a coherent heart. The balance between the two is an exchange of information that's not coming from out there, it's coming from within them. And now they have a Wi-Fi signal. And now they're connected. When your heart opens and your brain is coherent, you feel connected to something greater. You don't feel separate any longer. So then, can you then get so good at it that no person, no condition, no experience in your life is going to move you from it? That's the name of the game. That's the Wi-Fi signal now. And so now whatever you broadcast into the field is really your experiment with destiny. Not for the whatever you get, but for the fact that you created it. That's the fun part. And then, so many people, I have people in our work that created so much wealth. The first thing they did? They gave it away. Well, of course they would, because they now believe they can create it again. So now what? Now you just get good at giving. It's no longer about that. What do you want? You're going to get that car, and then you're going to be like, I'd rather drive the Mini. I don't really care about that whatever car. I'm just happy with what I have. So when you're at that point where you're so whole that you don't care what people think about you, when you're so happy with yourself that you're free, you don't care what you look like, you're just happy with you, man, that's freedom for people. That's so much freedom. So it brings me great joy to witness transformation. And that formula then, I always tell people, don't work on your healing. Work on learning the formula. Once you learn the formula and get it down, the healing will be the side effect of your personal change. So we teach that formula after about 10 years of research and looking at all the data. And we have great universities right now around the world that are very interested in what we're doing. It happens once, it's an incident. It happens twice, it's a coincidence. It starts happening over and over again. It's a law. So we're seeing people, all shapes, all colors, all ages, all sizes, doing the miraculous.